Okay, perfect. Okay, and so welcome everybody to this month's N3C Community Forum. We have 4 fantastic presenters today, so we're going to hear a lot about machine learning and also other exciting things that are going on. For everybody's, just to remind you of the ground rules, the presentation will be recorded and archived on the YouTube channel, and please use the Q&A button to post your questions. If you would like to speak, just go ahead and hit the raise hand feature and we will unmute you so that you can use your microphone. Next slide. And just to give you an update on the N3C, it is currently hosting data from 84 different sites with almost 23 million people and 8.9 million COVID positive cases. So we have a lot of data in there and a lot of great work going on in our enclave. Next slide, please. For July, we'll be talking about real-world data, a Vulkan-driven HL7 sample of a data project. And then in August, we're going to take a break. We get some summer vacation. So September will be, it's to be announced, but we'll have more programming for you in the future. Next slide. And today, we have the pleasure of having Doctors David Sahner, Shawn O'Neill, Nathan Hotaling, and Hythem Sidky presenting on algorithmic best practices. And they'll take us through a variety of topics, including the gap and the role of cross-disciplinary collaboration with regulatory considerations, and an overview of the AIM Ahead and NCAT's Advancing Data Analysis Training Program. And in additional to that, there'll be also some guides to the additional guides to the N3C. So with that, I'd like to turn it over to our panel of distinguished presenters.
Well, thank you, Rachel. I think I'm the leadoff batter for today, and I'll be covering the first 2 presentations. And I'd like to get through those within about 15 minutes or less to make sure that we reserve adequate time for subsequent presentations. And then we'll reserve about 10 or 15 minutes at the end for Q&A. So having said that, I'll share my screen. Let me take myself off video so that I don't distract myself. Share. Great. All right, minimize screen sharing, and let's see, enlarging. There we go. Right, so advancing is, let's try this. My slides are not advancing. Let's try. Well, there we go. Okay. I'm sorry some of this is cut off. Let's see if oh, it doesn't want to move to an inconspicuous place. But we'll begin by talking about what good algorithmic practice might be. Some have referred to this as good machine learning practice. And I just moved this banner out of the way so you could see GAP is the acronym that we use. And in our mind, GAP subtends a wider swath than what we traditionally think of as machine learning in the pipelines. And as most machine learners will tell you, data is about 80% of the equation. And we interpreted GAP in a broad context on the N3C GAP core team, which I had the pleasure of chairing for several years before recently handing the mantle of responsibility to another colleague. And our original core team remit included cross-pollination among team leaders, coordination of strategy and technical efforts. It basically consisted of a team of teams. We had leaders from a variety of teams, which in one form or another were directly or indirectly involved in good algorithmic practice. So this subsumed data quality and standards and the data ingestion and harmonization team with a focus on addressing quality issues, limited metadata, promotion of site quality through the provision of feedback and direct support. Also in the upper right, we have data pre-processing and imputation and feature engineering. To some extent, efforts on the part of the logic liaison group were important here in cobbling together concept sets. But this is a broad array of activity that includes variable creation, production of code templates, in addition to the concept sets. And then during data pre-processing, of course, imputation of missing values, normalization, feature selection, and extraction. In the lower left, we had individuals from ADM&S and the machine learning pipeline team who collaborated with us as well, biostatistical analytic decision support, which to some extent has taken form in the protocol template that folks have been laboring on. Tailoring of algorithms to data set size, regularization, focus on cross-validation, generalizability, and so forth, avoidance of bias. So it was really a broad effort, and we tried to lead by example with outputs from a variety of teams, including the machine learning pipeline team, consisting of what we hope to be exemplars in machine learning. So I'll simply mention here that as you've gleaned from the prior slide, it's obvious that successful machine learning hinges on teamwork and cross-disciplinary collaboration. And data scientists are major members of the team, but data science savvy subject matter experts, and by this I mean biologists, bench scientists, and clinicians, are also quite vital to success, can help their data science colleagues with whom they should be collaborating cheek by jowl in these projects, with identification of clinically relevant questions, feature selection, choice of feature transformations, interaction terms that might be included, data imputation methods, and then performance goals. There's a large focus on accuracy, looked at as a composite. And of course, there are many other metrics that are used to assess the performance of machine learning algorithm when it is fed independent test data. But sensitivity and specificity may need to be preferentially weighted in a particular clinical context based on whether or not, for example, the test is a screening assay or is being put to some other use. And clinicians can help in determining whether or not sensitivity or specificity should be weighted more heavily. Different parlance is used in machine learning, but the principle is the same. Finally, I've recently given a talk in the context of a lecture series that has been put together in the Aim Ahead project, focused on the importance of humans in the loop. This is a slide that I borrowed from that deck. But I think that it's important for us to bear in mind that human subject matter experts and end users, and a number of them are on this call. I realize that we've got a number of dyed-in-the-wool machine learning experts on this call, but also clinicians and biologists who may have less facility with some of those techniques. But their importance here is not to be forgotten. Subject matter experts such as clinicians and biologists can help in a variety of different ways that I explained on the prior slide, but should be involved in the development of the algorithms, implementation planning, and following deployment to help with monitoring the performance of these tools to ensure that accuracy is maximized and bias is minimized. Again, humans are involved in many points along the continuum here, more than simply coding, but building and evaluating machine learning pipelines. Again, that's a collaboration, avoiding automation complacency, optimizing user interfaces, and then refining the appropriateness and accuracy of the outputs through, prompt engineering or reinforcement. This is a very complex endeavor, which basically takes a village. I use that as a preface to talking more about regulated development, but I should pause here and say that what I just covered is critical for both regulated development and academic enterprises as well. There have been a host of machine learning faux pas in published papers. I didn't have a chance to review them. They've been covered in prior GAP talks. So I think what I'd hope to do here is just review some of the advice that we have from FDA and ask that we bear this in mind more generally. FDA interacts typically with the private sector. Of course, it will seek input from other quarters as well. But it is fundamentally tasked with protecting public health and ensuring, safety and efficacy and security of, among other things, medical devices. And software for clinical decision support is indeed classified as a medical device. FDA does hobnob with industry and regulates industry in the lead up to approval of these devices, and oftentimes after approval in the form of post-market surveillance, classically in the context of drugs and biologics. But there's now a premium that's being put on monitoring these algorithms going forward as well. I'll provide an example of that shortly. And as I said before, although they have not traditionally been involved in the practice of medicine, and this was emphasized at a recent teleconference, they're not involved directly in the practice of medicine at healthcare institutions. A lot of their advice, and I put this down here as a take-home message at the bottom, a lot of their advice is relevant more broadly. Cues from FDA process and guidance documents, which do foster quality and rigor during device development and after deployment too, as you'll see. I'm not going to go through all of this in great detail. I just wanted you to get a sense of the sweep of the regulation that is involved here. Software as a medical device is not one set of guidance documents. There is a set of documents that there are documents devoted to clinical evaluation, others that are more focused on quality, and all of these are readily found online. And I'll just say a few words about the quality management principles that they use, and preface that with some definitions on the right. Design is basically, as you would intuit, the components and the architecture and the interfaces. Configuration management focuses on what's changeable, as well as source code, documents. Development does include code and peer review, at least according to the guidance document. And verification is the assurance that the design and development activities conform to product requirements. Measurement down here at the bottom includes identification and correction of non-conformity to product requirements. So you assess the performance and post-release and may make some subsequent changes. But as you see, this is a very complex concentric diagram here that puts a premium on leadership and organizational support. So in biotechs, it makes sense to have a functional line that's devoted to this. Perhaps that's a cue that we can take in other contexts as well. It's very complex, but you need to have the personnel and the infrastructure and the correct work environment to do things the right way. And then once development lifecycle support processes need to be in place. As you can see, I won't read what you can see in the wheel here, but focus on risk management and measurement, basically a number of the concepts that I brought up on the right. I will say just a couple of extra words about software as a medical device, the guidance document, the clinical evaluation. There are separate sections on um, whether or not the clinical association is valid. The concept of analytical validation is spelled out. Does the device correctly process input data to generate accurate, reliable, and precise outputs? And then finally, on the right, the clinical validation. Does it achieve the intended purpose in your target population in the context of clinical care? And how this is interpreted going forward, I think, is going to entail lots of additional discussions, and in fact, has generated some fairly provocative editorial content in a recent journal article that I'll review with you shortly. There are two basic ways to approve devices at FDA. One is the 510(k) route, which is more expedient and typically used by companies. Here, a device is shown to be substantially equivalent to a predicate. So we've got a couple of blood pressure monitors here on the right. And the predicate is defined in a very specific fashion with respect to the underlying technology. And then there is the de novo route down here at the bottom, which is indicated by the unicorn. This may be much more stringent, and it may be the case that more by way of clinical decision support in the future that is developed through industry is subject to the de novo route. Precedent has been set. I'll review with you in a moment an example of that. But here, typically, there's no suitable predicate that's been identified. So in other words, you can't point to another blood pressure cuff that uses very similar technology. And it's not possible to show substantial equivalence to this predicate. So that entails a variety of other requirements. So this is a bit more on the de novo route. And again, I want to emphasize that this applies to industry, but as you'll see here and on subsequent slides that have to deal with FDA-condoned good machine learning practice, there are some messages that we can take to heart as well. So an FDA request for de novo evaluation is received from a sponsor, and then FDA classifies the experimental device into one of three categories based on the level of risk. It's either low, moderate, or high. And I apologize for this floating bar here, but it's very difficult to see this slide in its entirety, and I can't minimize this. But for low to moderate devices, general controls are usually adequate. For moderate to high devices, they do require some special controls, and these can include performance standards and post-market surveillance. But for high risk levels, or moderate to high risk levels, or high risk levels, the de novo route entails what's called a pre-market application. Okay, so this is as far away from 510(k) as one can possibly be in terms of rigor. It includes general controls plus quite a lot more detailed clinical investigations, protocols, statistical analyses, safety and effectiveness data, and whether or not that needs to be prospective. I think we can have some discussion about that at the end. The FDA also endorses, along with other regulators in UK and Canada, a number of principles of good machine learning practice. Some slides in the appendix that go through each one of these in detail. I won't have time to do so today, as I need to wrap up within a couple of minutes. But again, they do recognize the importance of multidisciplinary expertise. Key to all of this is that the data sets are representative of the intended patient population, and that we avoid bias. There's a focus on performance. The good software engineering is practiced, as well as security. Training data sets are independent of test data sets. Machine Learning 101, and a number of other techniques, principles here that I won't read word for word, but I will point out that I'll mention this: testing demonstrates device performance during clinically relevant conditions, and we'll talk more about what the implications of that might be on a subsequent slide. They also recommend that deployed models are monitored for performance over time, so it's somewhat akin to post-marketing surveillance. Will the de novo path become more commonly employed in the future? I think I can't speak on behalf of FDA. I'm not an agent of FDA. But per the guidance, clinical validation entails testing in your target population and for your intended use. That's a direct quote. And ensuring that users can, quote, achieve clinically meaningful outcomes. Although the 510(k) route has been employed, not long ago, a sponsor requested an FDA de novo classification for an AI tool that was designed to help physicians in assessing the risk of progression to sepsis. So in this case, the sponsor actually went the extra step and asked for that assessment. FDA deemed that it was a class 2 device, medium to high risk. And I provided the link here. You can take a look at the extensive litany of special controls that were required. And then finally, I'll just mention that there's been this push through New England Journal of Medicine AI, which is a new publication for pre-registration of AI interventions that are designed to help clinicians. And this is an excerpt from the article. I think we'll come back to this at the end, but a suggestion that randomized controlled trials with LLMs might be necessary. I won't read all of this here, but they push for a multifaceted collaborative approach among clinicians, advocacy groups, and other stakeholders. Of course, a focus on transparency and this push toward prior registration of these trials. So in some ways, this is beginning to sound a bit more like drug and biologic development, where we have had to register trials in industry if we're pursuing a study, for example, in patients with efficacy endpoints and so forth. So I think that's it for me. My conclusions here. GAP covers a wide ambit, including the efforts of data scientists and SMEs. The patient perspective is also critical. Data scientists are at the center, of course, in designing these algorithms, but need to collaborate quite closely with others. The FDA guidance documents on good machine learning practice, I'd suggest you look at them. This one in particular is not very long. It's short, but there are clear implications for good algorithmic practice. It isn't possible to predict how FDA is going to rule on subsequent de novo pathway classification requests, but a rigorous precedent has been set recently, and an influential publication is now demanding more transparency around studies supporting AI-based interventions. So I'll just end here by saying that given the dynamic nature of medicine and the tendency of models to drift, before and after comparisons of clinical outcomes may not be adequate here. And perhaps we can talk more about this at the end. But I'll stop there and turn the mic over to the next speaker. Sure.
Nathan, I'm not sure if it's possible, but the slide is pretty small. I don't know if there's a way to make it bigger. Yeah, it looks like maybe there's also, we have sound problems. We can't hear you, Nathan.
Nathan, we still can't hear you. Oh, we could hear you now.
Okay. And how did the slides look?
When you do when you're not in the present mode, it's actually a normal size. And once you go into the present mode, it's very small.
Weird. I don't know why that would be, but okay, I will just stay in this mode. Apologies, I'm not sure why that would happen, but okay. So thank you, Dave, for the talk on kind of what's going on in the good algorithmic practice space, and especially on the regulatory side. I wanted to talk a little bit more about things that are happening at NCATS, and specifically in conjunction with the Aim Ahead program, from Building 1 on kind of training and education that is happening. And I guess, as Dave kind of highlighted, I think a lot of these good algorithmic practices, it's not that it's not known what to do or that it's an area of active research. It's more about education and capacity building, getting the community to know the right tools and the right things to do. So NCATS partnered with the Aim Ahead program from Building 1 to help deliver some of this capacity building material to underserved communities across the United States. And I want to before I talk any more about the program, I wanted to highlight the team from NCATS that have been working on this. So it is led by Dr. Aubrey Hoffman, and then Carolyn Kelly, Jabril, Mohadisha, sorry, Shawn, Babajide, Alan, and then one more staff member that we're still trying to hire, have really done the vast majority of the work here in terms of curriculum design and delivery. Has been from a variety of folks, including Dave Sahner, but also Shawn O'Neill, who you'll be hearing from later in the talk, as well as Johanna Lumba and some other folks, Emily Pfaff, et cetera, from the community. So while it is me presenting, I want to say that really it's this huge team of folks that have kind of enabled this to happen, and none of it would have happened without them. So in terms of what has been going on in this program, in general, Aim Ahead has 3 different blocks of courses that started, I guess, about 20 weeks ago now. And the first block of classes, which was 12 weeks, started with an orientation and then led to a programming boot camp in R or Python for clinical scientists and folks that don't code, as well as an introduction to infrastructure of the N3C, more for data scientists and folks that didn't know how to code. And that kind of culminated in a mentorship and project ideas workshop that then kind of flowed to this next set of courses that they are currently being taught. And so here, again, for those folks that were taking that programming bootcamp in the first block of classes, they are now taking the Introduction to Infrastructure course that the data scientists took previously. And those data scientists are now doing either Introduction to Clinical Data Management or Introduction to Good Algorithmic Practices. That will culminate in a professional strengths and team science workshop, which will then go into the last block of classes, which is really kind of this focus on team science and problem-based learning projects that end in a training showcase at the Aim Ahead annual meeting. So we're really excited to be able to cover this kind of introductory content with the community. And I think it's been a great chance for us to kind of engage with folks who really weren't signed up and had DUAs initially, with the N3C and trying to help these students kind of figure out how to navigate both the regulatory and the scientific side has been a really great opportunity for us. So to talk a little bit more about the 3 main courses, that real-world data infrastructure course, the good algorithmic practices, and the intro to clinical data management. Again, there's 5 of these courses, but really 3 kind of unique sets of topics. There are 4 professional development workshops across all of this time. 10 interprofessional team projects will be selected at the end of this second block of courses. The students have been getting career mentorship, conference, are going to be able to present at a conference, and have been participating in this online learning community, which I think has been really great. There has been a focus on the new education tenet, and allowing students to have some hands-on learning using synthetic and de-identified data sets. There is definitely a focus on open science and modular curriculum, and I think that has been really powerful for the students to kind of see how the work that they are doing plays into this or feeds into this overall huge ecosystem that the N3C has built. These 3 sets of courses, again, kind of reviewed in the previous slide, are delivered over a 9-month period. So it's actually a substantive length of time that these students get to cover all of that content. We obviously had kind of different tracks for folks that are in the clinical path or non-technical path, and then the data scientists who already knew how to code and were kind of able to hit the ground running in the enclave. And I think that has been really great, and we've received a lot of engagement from both groups. The content is delivered obviously online, but in both synchronous classes and asynchronously, so that students that can't make the main time are able to. And then throughout, there's integrated assessment and evaluation. And what you can see in these tables on the right here is the classes that are taught in each one of these courses. And I'm not going to read them off to you, but I think what you get the idea of here is that each one of these classes probably in and of itself could be its own course. And so really all 3 of these are meant to be kind of just high-level introductory classes to get students to start to understand what is necessary to perform, cutting-edge real-world evidence and use machine learning and deep learning in a real-world evidence context. I did just because of the purview for that Dave gave us, and kind of just as this audience, I think, was a little more interested in the good algorithmic practices course modules. And so here there's a real focus on transparency and explainability in machine learning models, clinical data quality, integrity, and representativeness, bias, both implicit and explicit, variability, presentations across clinical dimensions, validating, verifying data sets, ethical considerations around clinical data processing, human-in-the-loop feedback, assessing robustness and generalizability of analyses, continuous data monitoring and updating, and building an analytic plan along with legal and regulatory considerations. And so, again, each one of these could have been its own course. And so I think we've been really lucky to get the instructors and the content creators that we have who are kind of world experts in each one of these. So this kind of first pilot program featured 55 early career trainees. So 25 of those were junior faculty, 4 postdoc trainees, 20 graduate students, and 2 postbacks. I think we had a range of kind of experience of those. So 30 PhDs or PharmDs, 5 MDs, 15 people with masters, and 5 bachelors. I think the disciplinary areas was mostly health, medicine, and clinical care, as well as data science, biostatistics, and a few math majors. I think the most exciting part of this Aim Ahead program is to help reach and serve underserved communities. And so we are really kind of proud of the fact that we had an extremely diverse group of students, both in terms of race and ethnicity, as well as sex and gender. I think the other really kind of neat thing is that we have students from across the United States, so people from Hawaii, as well as folks from the Virgin Islands, there we are. So from, I guess, 6 hours shifted to the west to an hour shifted to the right. We are serving kind of this huge community of students, and that brings a lot of its own challenges, but I think it has been something that is really kind of the most powerful part of this program, is this ability to hit all of these different students in all of these different places. We have gotten some really great feedback from our first round of classes in terms of the getting folks onboarded into the enclave and helping them to understand what needed to be done first. So the kinds of just ad hoc feedback that we've been getting is this is exactly the kind of information that students needed in order to be able to start with this kind of research. The structure of the course is great, and that they were able to start using the materials from class and the content that was covered right away in their actual research work. And so I think we've been really, really fortunate, again, to have the fantastic instructors and team that we have. And it's leading to great outcomes for our students. So we have been really lucky there. And so with that, I wanted to hand it off to Shawn O'Neill to cover the next part. Shawn, did you want to share your screen, or do you want me to continue sharing mine?
I can share.
Okay.
Maybe I can share. Let's find out. Okay. Can everyone see my screen okay?
Yes, we can.
All right, thanks. All right, so got a couple little things coming from the education and training domain team. Nothing earth-shattering, but just some things I wanted to remind folks about or show off that are gap related or at least gap adjacent. The first one of those is, I don't know if it's new since we've talked at the community forum here, but there is a new special topic chapter in the Guide to N3C about machine learning. Many thanks to the authors and chapter leads here, Peter and Justin and Blessy and Elena, David, Hannah, and Ms. Morali. And so this particular chapter covers a lot of, hands-on stuff around using using machine learning techniques in N3C, but it also has a really nice preamble section. If you've not checked it out, I'd recommend doing so. The preamble section covers a lot of topics that would be considered good algorithmic practice, whether you're working in machine learning in N3C or just more generally. And that includes topics on, generalizability, issues around social bias. In N3C or similar programs, we have pretty extensive site level heterogeneity that one should consider. Techniques for data missingness, feature engineering, as well as something, that's very important, the importance of including subject matter experts in your research, as well as, model explainability and topics related to that, and of course, documentation, which is always very important when you're doing any kind of algorithmic work. So definitely check out this relatively new chapter and the sections that talk about these bits and pieces here, as well as the references and links that are provided there. Although also not new, I'm sorry, actually I do have another new thing. This one is not yet actually released, but we are working on it. So much of the Guide to N3C is, as you might guess, about N3C specifically, but some things that are in the Guide to N3C are fairly general, and a variety of things are more general or at least adjacent to real world data. So the Logic Liaison team, and especially Andrea Zhao, thank you, Andrea, have been working on these little blurbs that we are going to include in the Guide to N3C that basically call out when a particular topic, even though it's about N3C per se, might apply to any sort of similar kind of research. So this one talks about, the importance of CDMs and taking into account, the data transfer and where the data comes from. So these are not live in the guide yet, but we are working on them. So again, thank you very much to Andrea and team. And then as a reminder, since we're talking about good algorithmic practice, we do have the chapter in there, chapter 9 on best practices for the research life cycle. These are the folks who contributed to that chapter. Harold did an awful lot of work to, Harold and Ken Wilkins especially did an awful lot of work to make this chapter come into play. And it covers a variety of things when working with observational health data, which is, of course, important to any kind of good algorithmic practice. So this chapter covers topics in reproducibility and reuse, protocol development for real-world data, as well as the N3C tools that are specific to that. So the protocol pad tool developed primarily by Kate Bradwell, as well as talking about, sort of well-defined methodologies for doing real-world data analysis, Strobe and StartWE, and there's a couple other ones in there. Discussions about causal inference and modeling, which is super important, whether you're doing, traditional statistics where you have p-values at play, or if you're doing even unsupervised machine learning techniques. The way that causality works definitely has a big impact to play in terms of your data analysis. This chapter also talks about fairness and bias, techniques for sensitivity analyses, and different categorizations for evidence quality. So that's another good algorithmic practice chapter in the Guide to N3C. Since I didn't have the link on the previous slides, here's the link here. You can go to covid.cd2h.org/guide to N3C and see those latest updates. In similar GAPI related news, we ran a short course earlier this year. It has since ended. You can check out the GitHub repo down there at the bottom. This short course was, sort of a brief but end-to-end introduction to real-world data analysis in N3C. And even though it covered lots of things that weren't good algorithmic practice related, it also talked about some good algorithmic practice stuff. Again, not specifically machine learning related, but if you're going to do good machine learning practice, you're probably going to have all these other things in place as well, like good quality documentation for your project, how to organize your code in a nice, clean and readable way, how to manage your data assets, like your concept sets and your data sets and things of that nature. And as always, understanding the source of the data, because misunderstanding the nature or source of the data is a common problem when applying machine learning or any technique to real world data, especially the kinds of complicated real world data that we are used to dealing with. And last but not least, I just wanted to kind of give you some other resources that we have available. The community notes, which lives inside of the N3C enclave, has a variety of notes that anyone can write and contribute to. So if you have a tip or a technique that you'd like to share, go to the N3C community notes from the enclave homepage. The button looks like this. There currently exists some nice notes in there from the logic liaisons about best practices for working with RWD data. And other considerations, things like how do you consider cases versus controls, and what does it mean to have the word controls in quotes, because of course we're not working with randomized samples from populations here. In the training material, in the training portal in particularly, there are some good training modules on N3C tooling and processes, of course, and OMOP and the logic liaison templates. And again, there's also one on sort of protocol creation and the protocol pad. So this is a tool that can help you organize your study and get your inclusion criteria and your exclusion criteria all lined up and help you define the kinds of variables that you're going to need for your study. And last but not least, I want to give a shout out to the Odyssey community, the Book of Odyssey, and both the Book of Odyssey and the Eden Academy have a variety of good real-world data educational resources, and many of these do touch on good algorithmic practice, good reproducible science, good definitions for what you're going to be analyzing, and so on and so forth. So that's all I had to share. I think I'm going to stop here and hand it back to the organizers.
Great, thank you guys so much. I think we do have a couple of questions in the chat, and a lot of them are related to how can people access the training program. So number one is Anjali has asked, will there be a provision for clinicians to attend the workshop alone? Oh, actually it disappeared.
I'm so sorry. I was trying to type and get the answers in.
Oh, no problem.
So maybe I'll just answer. I was going to just cut and paste it in each one because they're kind of related. So these are all good questions. The material that was developed with Aim Ahead is for a group of students, which we think is a little different from the general CTSA CTR group. And so all the material is available in a new place at N3C called the Educational Enclave, where all assets being developed are available there. There's also sets of synthetic data, and we encourage people to go in, use, and develop all those assets, concept sets, which are all available, synthetic data, to either teach, develop their own material, or if you're developing material or you want to just read it. In addition, though, we have been working with the NCAT steering committee on, it's called the Real World Data Task Force, on developing more material with the CTSA CTRs that would be more targeted towards a little bit different audience. It will always all be available, so that there is an ongoing activity, and use of this enclave is supported by Mike Carilla very generously, and it's available free of use for everybody. Does one apply access to the enclave? There's a new web page that will be up this Friday, which will explain this, but in brief, we still are requiring a data use agreement, even though the only thing in there is synthetic data, because this is the same data use agreement that's going to be used for other enclaves. And we do want people to understand that, this is a resource. It's free of use, and that data use agreement is hidden inside the N3C COVID website, but it'll have its own page at the end of the week. Right now, it's on the COVID website under the tenant menu, but it'll be more prominently announced just this week. So we're trying to build this and create what we're calling a minimal viable educational experience, where when you create a new DUR, you'll be able to come with data sets and all the things you want to do. So more to come. Very excited about this.
Okay, and yes, a couple of them are. I understand the educational materials will be located in the educational enclave, but is there going to be another round of courses? And they were saying, when would it start and how would they apply?
The courses were sponsored by Aim Ahead, and there will be another round next year. I believe the announcement's coming out, Nathan, correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe the announcement's coming out in early fall, September. And that particular Aim Ahead is sponsored by ODSS, and those folks are, this time we had about 55 students, and I'm imagining we'll have another 55. It'll be very similar agenda, though we're hoping to revamp the material to be a little bit more asynchronous and more interactive. And very much all the people who've been teaching on it, we're taking the material apart and trying to optimize it. So hope that helps.
Yes, and I think if you guys have any links or anything, most of the questions are centered around where do we get access to the educational enclave and the program. So if you have any links where those, when the applications and the next round comes out, that would be great.
Right. It might also be worth mentioning. I don't know, has Aubrey been able to join as a panelist? I think that was a great idea to have her come on board.
Okay, so
Yes, Tarsini, I put a link in there. I don't, could somebody get it to Aubrey? It's the link that I used to sign in, but I'm not exactly
Yeah,
sure.
I can share
work
it
for
with
her.
the rest of the.
Yeah, there she is.
Okay.
Sure. Yeah. While she's coming on board, I just thought I'd mention I'm working with Caroline Kelly. Since there seems to be an interest in additional learning, I'm working with her on both an introductory machine learning course focused on the fundamentals, and then a more advanced course. And the idea is to have content for all of that produced by the end of August, and that will be converted to an online format. I believe it will be it will allow asynchronous learning, but it will be interactive, and so more will be forthcoming in that regard.
Great. And I had a question myself. I live in the diabetes and obesity domain team or Recover, but it occurs to me that we also have a large group of epidemiologists, statisticians, clinicians, like we have these great working groups. And for the projects, for those team projects, is there any consideration for integrating them into like domain teams and trying to get them into level 2 or 3 data to be able to do projects in those settings? With the students, I mean, with the aim ahead.
if I may jump in, Rachel, what a great question. Absolutely. So for this first pilot year, we have invited the students to submit their ideas for projects, and diabetes is certainly one of them. As you can imagine, we've got some diverse students with quite a lot of interests, everything from cardiology to neurology, long COVID, full spectrum. We would love to engage the community. We'd love to engage the community as advisors. We'd also love to, once these trainees have gone through these projects, to begin to integrate them into the community and help them have some both peer-to-peer mentorship and also some perhaps career development mentorship as a diverse community trying to get into this field, these early career scientists. So that is absolutely the intention. There is the Aim Ahead Connect platform. You're welcome to anyone is welcome to register there and connect with them. And many of the people that are there are looking for ideas for projects and would love to join the team. Certainly our trainees are. But also, if there's those who are specifically interested in that type of collaboration or mentorship, please reach out. I'd be very happy to connect with you.
Oh, that's great. And I see the post for the training program there. And yes, I could see definitely in the domain team, what we're constantly looking for is there a student to work on this one, or is there somebody who's interested in this topic who might want to write something up? So I think it's an exciting way to connect people in early career development with ongoing projects or ideas that, we have, but don't necessarily have the manpower to do every single project. But yeah, I think it's a great area for ideas.
Absolutely. And very synergistic interest with the trainees who really want to get engaged and would benefit from having a community.
Yes. And I don't see other questions, but can I ask one more then? I'm involved in clinical informatics training over here at Stony Brook, but there's a large sort of community of clinicians who do training in clinical informatics after their primary specialty. And so this would be a great curricular sort of add to them. I think more and more they're becoming interested in data science, and good algorithmic practice is huge. So is it okay if I share this with sort of the program directors?
Yeah, and Rachel, part of the idea is that we want to open, because of the data transfer agreement in COVID, we weren't really actually allowed to use the data for training. And one of the reasons we set up this enclave is that it is only synthetic data, but it is for teachers to develop material and learners to use it. So you are welcome to go in there and develop classes, and as long as you share it with everybody else, it's considered a community service. And the synthetic data, I should put a shout out, was Andrew Williams at Tufts. This is based on some of the work that they had done, and was enormously generous to donate this to the community. So we would love you to use it and take it, and everybody else to take advantage of the material that's being developed. And
I want to jump in there and give a shout out to Tufts and Andrew for that synthetic data. It has a lot of nice properties in terms of its realism and richness. Is generated by a transformer model, actually, I believe, which is also pretty cool. But probably the best feature of it is that it is not restricted from screenshotting and recording. So one of the challenges, if you've ever had to try and teach on this kind of data, you have your cohort of students and you can't actually record or share any materials that show row level data. And that's something that is changing with this data. So you'll be able to make your teaching materials available outside of the hosted environment, which is really awesome.
The only other thing I'll say is that the educational enclave doesn't just have synthetic data or classes. All of the assets that are in N3C, the concept sets, the algorithms, the knowledge store, all the tools are there for you to use. So it's the whole rich enclave, and that the community has developed. So please do take advantage. And a special shout out to Aubrey, who I don't know why you let her come on as a panelist, but since you did, she is just really been a wonderful asset to the community. We really appreciate her being with us.
Thank you, Ken. A pleasure. I will echo that shout out to all the instructors, including Dave and Shawn especially, and Johanna, who have been really doing the bulk of the work on this program. It's been absolutely fantastic.
I think the only other thing, and I think Ken said it well, is that the hope is that the educational enclave can become like the place where all educators are working together to help their students. It doesn't have to be real world evidence specific. It could be something, as you said, like clinicians are interested in, like showing an example of X, Y, or Z. I think the dream for the educational tenant is that we can all, as a community, build these resources together. And of course, there's some work being funded by Aim Ahead, but that it's going to be made available there and made available to the community. But I think the dream is that it can become a lot more than that. And so I think, with that, we're excited to have everybody start to sign up.
Just may I just ask a question, Ken, and is there any consideration that, I mean, we do have the synthetic data. Is there any consideration to importing another synthetic data set potentially in the future that is more recent? I think what we have right now is terrific. But going forward, as we all know, medicine's a dynamic field, and the data that are used to produce this, of course, if they're more recent, then it might have more relevance. What's your sense here?
Yeah, David, it's a great question, and the answer is yes. There's a couple of efforts going on in parallel. The Odyssey community, Chao Peng has brought in a open source synthetic generator that they're developing, and people are more than welcome to get on that. In addition, we're working with the National Science Foundation, and they are bringing in two synthetic data tools, both open source, in the next few months. And they're going to, and they work differently, and this is kind of out of my wheelhouse, but they're going to do some validation, both scientific validation and obviously re-identification validation, and we're hoping to make those available. And just this is a little bit of minutia. Part of this effort also is to move that generation to an on-prem, because the cost of running these is very expensive just in GPU. So if we can validate these tools and come and work through this, we think we can generate this data on an ongoing basis and afford it. And so, yeah, there's a lot of effort. And so we're hoping that these are validated and they are open source, and people can trust that they are useful scientifically and safe to use, which is just as important.
Yeah, and it could serve a dual purpose. I mean, you've got the training, but I haven't really had any discussions with FDA about this. But at some point down the pike, if we believe that the synthetic data, built using transformers or whatnot, is quite like real data and accounts for some of the multivariate dependencies as well, could we be using that to test the generalizability of existing algorithms that are applied in the clinic? So, for example, if Stony Brook has, a protocol that they've for sepsis, or some other institution is interested in, sharing it with another institution, you get a sense of whether or not it generalizes well.
I think you're totally right, David. It's
Yeah.
kind of like develop some of the algorithms and then push them out for validation, generalizability, and all of those things where we need to push those out. So I think that's a great model. I think that would be something we'd love to do. Yeah, we have talked to Mimic in the past, Jared, and I have to admit that that conversation, it was nobody's fault. It was just COVID was too much for everybody. So maybe we can reapproach them. Mimic's a little bit different model on that, in that they generally only go to one investigator at a time. And the thing that we were negotiating with at the time, which was, no, we don't know who's going to use it. We just want to have this so everybody can use it. And this is really very different from what they had done in the past. And so it was just kind of too much at the peak of the conclave, at the COVID pandemic. So maybe we can get back to talking to them, but we'd love to have that.
All right, I think we're at the hour. So fantastic discussion. And thank you all so much for your hard work. This is an amazing resource. And thank you so much for presenting it all today. We will see you guys next month.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, bye-bye.